and he told them this parable.
Okay, how's everybody doing tonight? Almost missed my cue there. Screwing around. We get settled here, I'll try not to knock anything over today. These freaking music people think they own everything. Did everybody have a good spring break? Oh! I didn't see anybody on MTV or anything, so. Did we go to Mexico or anything? No? Did we go anywhere? There's no party like a Monmouth party, right? Anyways, well, if you didn't figure it out, we are starting a series on parables, and it's going to go for probably what seems like the rest of your life, or until me and Sean get sick of it, pretty much. And we're starting this week, and I got first choice, and so I picked an easy one. I picked the prodigal son, because that's how I roll. I'd let Sean handle the ones that are hard. I gotta go over here so I read my Bible. But, and we want to talk about parables because Jesus talks in parables because a lot of things that Jesus were talking about in his time were really radical ideas. Like, it's kind of hard for us to understand because Christianity has been such a part of our lives and a part of our culture for so long. It's hard for us to understand how radical the ideas that Jesus had were in his time. Especially to the Jewish people, who have had one way of living. They had the law, which they followed, and then Jesus came in and flipped everything upside down. So he used these parables to try to kind of make it a little easier for the people to understand what's going on. And now 2,000 years later, it's kind of hard to understand because we don't all live on farms and we're not all sowers or whatever the parables are about. So they're a little harder to understand nowadays, and so we're going to try to kind of put them back into context and try to help you understand them a little better. And I know you've probably heard the prodigal son 4 million times, but I'm going to try to, maybe I'll give you a new way of looking at it, or maybe give you a little more insight on it. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you want to follow along, we're in Luke. I can't even read that. You can put it up, man. It makes us look official, though.
Hace eso, mira.
What's that? Yeah, I won't read it. It just makes me look good. Okay. And one thing I want to say before I start reading this is Jesus is talking to the Pharisees in this account. And the Pharisees, as we all know, are the people who whole life and basically was devoted to upholding the law and make sure the law was followed. And so that's just kind of something to keep in mind. We'll talk a little bit about that more later. And it says, to illustrate the point further, Jesus told them a story. A man had 2 sons. The younger son told his father, I want my share of your estate now, before you die. So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land. And there he wasted all his money in wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The young man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him, but no one gave him anything. Now I want to hit on a couple points here real quick, some context issues. In that time, this was the younger son, and after his father died, he probably would have been inheriting about 1/3 of what the father owned with 2 sons. The older son got 2/3 and the younger son got 1/3, probably most likely. And for him to go to his father before he died to ask for his inheritance would have been a repulsive idea. It would have been basically like you going to your parents now and telling them to sell your house because you want money because you want to go to Vegas. It's basically the same thing as if you went to your parents now and you said you wanted your inheritance now. And they're greedy and they probably wouldn't give it to you. But I'm just kidding. My parents aren't that greedy. And so that's basically what this would be like. And so the Pharisees hearing this, people who are kind of high people in courts and are very into how things are supposed to be run, this would be very repulsive to them. And the second thing that would be very repulsive to the Pharisees is the fact of the pigs. Jews they hate pigs. They're an unclean animal. And that means they don't touch pigs, they don't eat pigs, they don't work with pigs. They hate pigs. And so you don't mess with pigs at all. And so the fact that a Jewish man would be feeding pigs would be totally repulsive to the Pharisees. Now let's go on a little bit. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare. And here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me on as a hired servant.' So he returned home to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son.'" Now, I want to stop there real quick and give you one more point. Now, whenever I used to hear this story, I used to always think of the farmhouse with like the picket fence, and he's got like fields all around it, and then like the father's like sitting on the front porch like smoking a pipe, and then he sees his son like way off in the distance, and then he comes running to him, because he's walking down like the long dirt road. But that's really probably not how it was. Probably most likely how it was they lived mostly in villages. So even though they were farmers, they just kind of had like these villages with like plots of land kind of scattered on the outside of the village or in the village or whatever. It's kind of like, I don't know if any of you have been to like I went to Japan. My parents lived in Japan. They just got back. And when you go visit them, it was really where they lived kind of in a smaller town. And it'd be like, here's the video store. And then here's like a 1 acre rice paddy. And then here's the bike store. And it was like, how weird. It was like the rain from the ditch like flooded the rice paddy. And it was like, this is weird. But that's just how they do it. And that's probably more what it was like. And so when the son would return home, it's not like he was like, nobody was around. He probably had to walk through like a main drag street to get to his father's house. And now, in most of these villages, everybody kind of knows everybody. And so probably what would happen is like everybody would kind of come out and look at the son who's basically disgraced his father and his family, and probably the whole city, for that matter. And they would probably come out, and he'd probably have to walk kind of like through this gauntlet. That's how most of these villages were set out. And as he's probably walking through this, here comes his father, running through the crowds to kiss his son, and to hold him again. And that, if you think about it that way, it just makes it that much more powerful. It's really an amazing picture that Jesus paints here to the Pharisees. Now let's finish this up, if I can figure out where I ended here. Okay. But his father said to his servants, "Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast. For this son that was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost but now is found, so the party began. Meanwhile, the older son in the fields working,